Hey there, Think Twice fans. We are back with another gameplay video. See, we're rolling there for who goes first. If you didn't watch our other gameplay video, I mentioned that when Drew and I just kind of play these play testing style games, we just have a set roll automatically. We only ever have to roll once. Drew is evens, I'm odds. As you can see in this video, you've got me on the left in a classic purple sweatshirt playing Yawmoth today, and Drew on the right playing Storm. So we're going to get some modern gameplay going. Once again, this is not for a tournament or anything like that. It is simply we're playing some games, enjoying it, and we figured maybe some people would like just watching some matches of Magic and seeing how they go. A couple of changes from last time. You can see we've shifted where the life totals are. We're a fairly low-tech operation, believe it or not, and we were just dealing with some glare on my phone for the life totals, and so it's just shifted over a little bit. Drew started out, he was on the play with a stomping ground, and then my turn is I'm doing a little bit of shortcutting here. I'm announcing that I'm going to fetch with my Misty Rainforest for a forest, and then after that, I'm going to cast Green Sun Zenith Rex's 0 to go get Dried Arbor, and just do it all at once in order to shuffle it all at the same time and not have to search, shuffle, and then search again. So that's what's going down there. I will make one note that I was atrociously bad at keeping the life totals updated properly during this match. Eventually I get there, but I'm just kind of on a delay on it, so I apologize for that. Drew goes off with a Manamorphose. See, classic spell here. In Storm, he's going to make a couple of mana. He's going to make 2 red mana. You can see that with the dice kind of right near his deck. That's how he's going to represent it this game. He's also going to draw a card. And then he's going to lead with, I believe that is Pyretic Ritual. So 1 and a red, make 3 red mana. Classic Storm things. He's going to go with a Ral, which is going to reduce all of his instants and sorceries. He's going to go into another ritual. We see the rolling for flipping of Ral. Drew always has evens are he wins the flip, odds are he loses the flip. We were just making sure that Drew had the right amount of mana in his mana pool there. And he's going to cast some cards. We got a Ren's Resolve. Hits 2 lands off of that. Somewhat frustrating. As you can see now, you can see in Drew's hand, he's got a land and another ritual in hand. He is going to choose to flip his Ral, even though it can't do anything like ultimate. And I believe he's going to end up just killing my Dryad Arbor here. So he deals 1 damage to Dryad Arbor, 1 damage to me. I'm going over my turn. I'm going to go with an Undercity Sewers. Oh, sorry, not Undercity Sewers. Underground Mortuary. Undercity Sewers is the blue-black one. This is a Surveil one. Leave it on top and pass the turn. So not much going on there. Drew's going to play one of those 2 lands from that Ren's Resolve on his next turn. The uptick of the Rals, you can see here, just kind of mimics the static ability of the front side. Instants and sorceries cost 1 less. I'm going to go with a Malevolent Rumble. See, Drew's admiring my walking ballista there. I'm going to choose to put the Young Wolf of those cards into my hand. I'm going to make a spawn token. shock in an overgrown tomb. And now I'm going to use the spawn and that overgrown tomb to cast a Dredger's Insight. I'm playing a build that's running some number of both. I believe, if I remember correctly, it is 4 Rumble, 2 Insight. They do fairly similar things. The Insight has the option to, it also gains you life, like mostly when you're using it in Yawmoth is when your Undying creatures return with Undying. It gains you a life back and thus is often going to offset the life cost of activating Yawmoth. Drew's going to fetch on his end step. Grabs a commercial district. Decides he does not want the Dragon's Rage Channeler. Goes his turn. Another uptick on the Ral. Yet another fetch. Finds a mountain quickly. You can see I am tapped out. Doesn't look like I have much going on. You can see a few cards in my hand. You can see that Yawmoth we know about. It looks like there's a Beseiju, a Yawmoth, a Court of Calling, some other tools in there. So we got 2 combo decks facing off here together. We're going to start with a Desperate Ritual, basically the same thing as Pyretic Ritual, just a different name. And then Drew's going to cast Past in Flames. So this is going to allow him to recast any instant or sorcery in his graveyard. It's going to give them all flashback equal to their mana cost. So essentially he gets to use all those same spells again. The other cool thing about Past in Flames is it has flashback itself, which allows you to kind of use it 2 different times. So he can kind of freely do this just to see what kind of value and everything he can get. You can see here Drew's starting off by casting his rituals. Uses the mana Morphos. He's up to 6 red mana in the mana pool. He's counting Storm on that other die. A little bit hard to see here, kind of small. Gets the Ruby Medallion into play, so multiple reducers in play now. Looks like he's got another Ren's Resolve in hand. Or there's a, I'm forgetting the name of the other one. There's 2 cards of the same thing. There's Ren's Resolve and there's something else. Hitting a couple of lands. Just a little bit of a camera shift, sorry. So hitting too many lands kind of ends his storming off for the turn. He ends up not even casting the other 2 rituals because without cards to cast, they don't really do much, so he'd rather save them for another turn. I put in a Shifting Woodland into play. Deciding what to cast. I end up casting Green Sun Zenith for X equals 3. So I'm going to go grab a 3-drop green creature from my deck. And I'm going to grab Endurance. I'm going to target Drew with the Shuffle Your Graveyard into the bottom of your library effect. Basically making it so I can tell that he didn't have any more action in his hand, so he's relying on the graveyard for it. And figured this way that Past in Flames is probably his best course of finding more action cards. And so now he's just got to draw it off the top, so he's only got one chance really to get anything. I believe the Ral needs to be at 8 loyalty in order to use his ultimate, which is often a game-winning one. This was Dragon's Rage Channeler. It's just a 1/1. Upticks the Ral. I'm going to fetch again on my turn. Grab a swamp. Yawmoth is a rather complicated deck if you haven't played it. So a lot of times you got to sit and think for a minute about how to go through all your actions. I'm going to cast that Yawmoth we've known about for a couple turns, followed up with a Yawmoth. I'm going to activate Yawmoth's ability to place a -1/-1 counter on a creature and then draw a card to get rid of that Dragon's Rage Channeler. Yawmoth comes back with Undying, so it comes back with a +1/+1 counter on it. We're going to attack Ral down for 3. So Yawmoth is the core of the Yawmoth deck. Big surprise there, right? And essentially it works around being able to repeatedly activate that second ability that Yawmoth has. Pay 1 life, sacrifice another creature. Those are the costs, and then you get to put a -1/-1 counter on up to 1 target creature and draw a card. You can pair it with undying creatures like Yawmoth in order to continually bring them back to the battlefield, and draw a whole bunch of cards. And when you have effects like Dredger's Insight or something else in play, you offset the life loss, and so you can just do it over and over and over and over and over again, which is cool. Here's on his turn. He's going to kill the Yawmoth, deal 2 damage to it. Pass back to me. See a whole mess of cards. Looks like I've got a couple of Grists. I think I'm doing a check for what lands I still have available to fetch in the deck. There are 2 forests, 1 swamp, and 2 overgrown tombs, and 2 of the underground mortuary. Going to Chord of Calling, it looks like, for X's 1. Find another Yawmoth. Then Chord again for Yawmoth. This turn is going to get complicated because I'm going to combo off here. But sometimes it's still a little bit of a messy way to get there. So Drew and I are also talking about this at the table because, like I said, we are just playing casual events. So I'm explaining that I'm going to loop the Yawmoths together so you can use Yawmoth's ability to sacrifice 1 to put a -1/-1 counter on the other if it has the +1/+1 counter. And so then that one, the one you sacrifice, comes back. The one that had the counter on it loses the counter. And then you always end up with 1 with a counter, 1 without, so you can just loop them back and forth and draw. And because I have the Dredger's Insight in play, a creature is leaving my graveyard every turn in order to come back. So we're talking about what I'm looking for here. And so basically what I'm doing is I've got to find a way to get some sort of kill condition card into play. In this deck, I'm playing Blood Artist. And so what I'm doing right now is I'm drawing until I have the Other Endurance and a Chord of Calling in hand. And I erroneously think that I need to still draw for it, and I actually just missed that I had the Chord of Calling in hand already. And so I find it there. So I didn't actually need to draw the whole deck, which is why I was drawing it 1 by 1. I could have just picked up the whole deck and shortcutted it if I needed to. So now I'm trying to figure out, okay, what exactly how exactly is the path of doing this? So I know what I need to do is I'm going to execute a rather complicated series of actions where I need to use those endurances to get another 1-drop into play, shuffle those endurances back into my deck along with the Chord of Calling, draw those out again, then draw them again, evoke, cast them, use the Chord of Calling to get a 2-drop into play. So where I am now is I've cast an endurance and I've stacked it. And I'm deciding how I want to stack these triggers. Okay. So I need to make it so I shuffle that endurance back into play. So I need to sacrifice it. But so what I'm doing now is I'm activating the Yawmoth. And so what I'm explaining is that I'm activating Yawmoth, targeting my tapped endurance to get the -1/-1 counter, and then sacrificing that as the cost for the ability. So then I don't draw a card, because if you notice, my library is empty, so I don't want to lose the game due to drawing a card with an empty library. So you can do this because of the way the rules work in Magic, which is to activate a spell or ability, you announce you're using it, you then declare targets and then determine costs and pay them. So you can, with Yawmoth's ability, you can choose to target a creature that you're intending to sacrifice for the ability, so that then the ability will fizzle and you will not draw a card. And so that's what I've done with that endurance, because I need an endurance in the deck because I have to be able to continuously shuffle my deck. So what I'm doing here is I'm sacrificing the endurance that was already tapped because I can't use it to Chord. And so now my graveyard is going to be shuffled and put on the bottom of my library. So that becomes my library. I'm now going to use Chord of Calling to go find a 0-drop creature, which I shuffled my Dryad Arbor into play. Then that gets sacrificed. So those 2 cards are now there. Basically, now I'm going to draw cards again. I have to draw until I draw that endurance again. At this point, I was starting to figure out that I might not be able to do this in my turn because the Blood Artist is in my hand. So we're talking through what's going on here. So that's why Drew starts to pack up the game. He knows that I've got him dead. I just have to figure out the minutia of going through the actions, and I'm telling them that what's going to happen is I'm going to end up winning the game in Drew's upkeep. So, and this is just taking me a little bit of talking through to figure out. I've been playing the deck for maybe a month or so now, and some of these things are convoluted, and I'm used to doing this with Prosperous Innkeeper. If I had Prosperous Innkeeper instead of Dredger's Insight, I could win without Drew ever getting to untap. But without drawing a card, I know Drew can't win. So what I thought I had to do is I thought I had to go get another 1-drop, and I don't actually need to go Chord for anything. I just needed to put both endurances back in the deck because I have to draw both of them to Chord out a 2. So then what's going to happen is I'm going to draw the rest of my deck, and then I'm going to go to my cleanup step where I have to discard cards. So I figured out I have to win in Drew's upkeep here because the Blood Artist is in my hand. And I need that in order to let the Yawmoth loop be lethal. Because Blood Artist says whenever a creature dies, target player loses 1 life and I gain 1 life. You can see it there. So I'm explaining all of how it works because it is a rather complicated series of actions. And if you've never seen it happen, it's not fully intuitive what's going to happen. So I'm telling Drew what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my end step or my cleanup. I'm going to keep 7 cards. I keep the 2 endurances and a Chord of Calling and just a few other green cards so I can evoke. And I discard the rest of my deck. Okay. So all of those cards are there. So then we go to Drew's upkeep. I evoke the endurances. I'm going to resolve the shuffle effect of the first one. So my graveyard becomes my library. I'm going to use my 5 creatures to Chord of Calling for a 2-drop, which puts the Blood Artist into play. And then I can just do the loop and and go through there. So then I can just draw a bunch of cards, and that will end the game. Very complicated series of explanations. For those of you interested in really knowing how that works, I'm going to be putting out a new Yawmoth video. If you'd watched my old one where I was mostly just testing a camera, I did a deck tech, but I didn't fully explain that series of actions. I'm going to make another one with some updates and new cards in the deck, and I'm going to explain all those loops. I've also written a deck primer, if for anybody who might be interested in reading that goes through the explanation of all these combo actions in writing. So, but that is how I won the game. I won the game in Drew's upkeep by being able to go and Court of Calling the Blood Artist out of my deck into play, and then just loop the Young Wolves in order for all of those deaths to be lethal to Drew. We're going to play another non-sideboarded game, so this is just the same main decks again, and then we'll get to sideboarding after. So Drew's going to be on the play. Looks like he's taking a mulligan. I don't know how many of you are. I'm definitely a deck list tweaker. I'm always kind of messing around with exactly, oh, do I want this one card in here? Do I want one more of these, one less of those? In the hand that I kept here, you'll notice that I have a Hapatra Vizier of Poisons. That card, after these matches, I decided I didn't really actually feel the need to have in the deck, but I wanted an extra Young Wolf. I'm only playing 3 in this video, but I would actually like to play 4 because it's so important to the deck. So Drew leads off on what looks like a Bloodstained Mire. I'm going to fetch an Overgrown Tomb and play a Delighted Halfling. Drew's going to fetch on end step. Looking for a Surveil land. Yep, there's the commercial district. He found it. It's always a little funny when you watch yourself on video and you realize stuff about yourself. Like, apparently I talk with my hands all the time. Drew surveils a Ren's Resolve. Or no. Is that... God, what's the other card? Reckless something? Reckless Impulse, I believe is what it's called. Hold on. There's 2 cards that are essentially the same thing. Yeah, Reckless Impulse. So this is the other one. So Drew has Ren's Resolve and Reckless Impulse. They're almost the exact same card. It's exile the top 2. You can play those until end of your next turn or something. So my second turn is a Young Wolf and then a Walking Ballista with 1 counter. Drew's got a Ruby Medallion into play, now 3 lands after a fetch. And as you can notice, you see here, Drew has fetched twice, and I still haven't updated his life total. Thankfully, he's keeping it on that green die at the top of the screen, and every once in a while I catch myself realizing that I haven't done that. There's that Ren's Resolve. See a Mountain and a Dragon's Rage Channeler. Keeping Storm Count up on that Ruby Medallion. Plays the Channeler. Walking Ballista is going to take out the Channeler on Drew's end step, and then we're going to go to my turn. See, Wall of Roots, Endurance, a couple lands, and that Hapatra. Play land, we're going to attack for a big old 1 with that Yawmoth. I actually kept up on that life total that time. Look at me. We're going to follow up with a Wall of Roots. Wall of Roots is an instant ability. It's a 0/5, and you can put a -0, -1 counter on it to add a green mana. It's a rather old card. But essentially, it's effective at being it's a fast mana dork, and yes, you can only use it for so long, but I mean, if your 2-drop is able to make 5 mana across a game, it's pretty good. Wall of Roots is played. One, you can get a rebate on the cost of it immediately, but also you can do it once on your turn, once on your opponent's turn, and because it's a green creature, it taps extremely effectively for Court of Calling. Drew's going to get a Ren's Resolve, which reveals a land and Manamorphose. Going to cast that Manamorphose, float 2 red mana, draw a card. Looks like he's got a couple of Dragon's Rage Channelers and then maybe Ren's Resolve in hand. There's that Channeler. Another Channeler. Still 2 red floating. That's represented by that die. I know it's probably hard to see the pips, but do that. We're going to see that Ren's Resolve, and he's going to start surveilling a bunch. Decides he wants that card on top. Making sure we got our storm count updated. Drew has cast 5 spells this turn. We see a Ritual and a land. Lots of lands off the top. There's going to be a Ritual. 6 spell, down to 0 mana, up to 3. We're going to do some surveils, not a Ruby Medallion, leaving the next one on top. But that's kind of the end of the string here. I'm going to fetch. We're going to add a counter to the Wall of Roots, add a green mana. We're going to play the Endurance. So Drew's going to get rid of that graveyard. Oh, I catch this in the next game. We're doing this incorrectly because I just say, oh, I'm going to target you with the Endurance's Shuffle. What Endurance actually does is you shuffle your graveyard and put it on the bottom of your library. So all of those cards should be on the bottom of Drew's library, not just shuffled in. But I didn't communicate that effectively. I just said the shuffle. I'm going to cast a Grist, the Hunger Tide. Drew blocked, still thinking that he had a graveyard in his creature had Delirium. Brings my Yawmoth back, and then I realized that I'd surveilled a card that I wanted to keep to the top, and so then I couldn't +1 the Grist. And then I was starting to think, well, oh, maybe I wanted to just... The natural sacrifice would have been the Yawmoth, but now it has the counter on it, so I have to think of a different creature to get rid of. I'm just going to sacrifice the Delighted Halfling and kill that other Dragon's Rage Channelers to keep Drew off of a whole lot of action. He draws another one. I'm going to put Yawmoth into play. Plus the Grist to mill a card, make an insect token. Drew knows I have the Hapatra because I accidentally showed it, and he was asking me why didn't I use Walrus Pay for Yawmoth and then cast the Hapatra, and then he realized that Hapatra cost 2 mana, so I was like, it didn't matter, I didn't have the second mana anyway. So I used the insect token to reset the Young Wolf, and then sacrifice the Young Wolf to put an egg one counter on the DRC, so I lose 2 life and draw 2 cards in that process and attack him for 3. I believe he should be at 14, not 17. We're going to kick it off with a Reckless Impulse. We see a Ral and a Mountain. See lots of lands on Drew's side, and lots of lands he's seen off of these Exile 2 effects so far in this match. Also remember, this is still a main deck game, even though it's our second game. We played 2 before sideboard. Drew decides to not cast the Ral because he wants to be able to try to go off with it on a turn. He doesn't have any action, so he can wait for next turn. And it's protected in the exile zone. I can't really do anything about it. Or I could very easily kill it if he had put it into play. Yawmoth puts a lot of permanents into play, and so sometimes keeping the board clear and uncluttered is difficult. So I use Yawmoth's ability to pay black and discard a card to proliferate. So the Grist gets an extra counter and the Young Wolf gets an extra one just getting for some extra damage. Not sure why I didn't attack with the Yawmoth as well. Probably should have. It's just an error on my part. He's going to cast that Ral. The Rune Medallion reduces all red spells. And then he's going to play that Reckless Impulse. In response, I'm going to use Yawmoth's ability to sacrifice my insect to put a neg1 counter on the Ral, which triggers the Hapatra, because Hapatra sees a neg1 counter put on a creature, makes a snake. So I can continuously sacrifice that snake to put more neg1 counters on Drew's Ral, and so I do it enough times to kill it, so I'm going to draw 3 cards, lose 3 life. I end up trading my insect token for a 1/1 snake with Death Touch. So Drew's now got a Past in Flames, a Manamorphose. He's already played a land for the turn, so that Bloodstained Mire isn't doing him much, so he's going to run the Manamorphose out there. Floats 2 red mana, draws a card. Arid Mesa in hand. That card draw didn't do him a whole lot of good. He's going to use the 2 floating plus 1 more to cast the Past in Flames. See what else he can get himself into there. Going to lead on the Manamorphose being flashed back out of the yard. Two red mana, draws a card. He's going to use a Desperate Ritual. Ups his mana. Double land off the impulse effect. So that's not doing him any good. Rune Medallion and a land. Also 2 non-factor hits. There's a lot of ways he can continue this chain. A Ral and a Rune Medallion. Also 2 non-impactful hits. And he's run out despite the fact that he's not out of mana. He just simply doesn't have any other cards to cast. A little bit of unfortunate luck there. So he's just gonna put some things into play. Another Ruben Medallion, another Ral. And then he passes. I'm gonna kill the Ral, draw 3 more cards, and then I just have lethal on board. So he's showing them to the camera. I'm going to start taking game actions, and then we just realize that I have lethal on board and I just need to attack. Drew's just like, County's like, why don't you just kill me? And I'm like, oh yeah, I can use the combat step. Sometimes it's really easy to get lost in the fact that you're playing a combo deck and you just are trying to combo everything. So we are now going to go to sideboard games. Drew's also now showing that, look, see, he does play the grape shots in his deck. Luckily, only 4 of them. So here we go to a sideboarded game. We're going to make some swaps out of our decks and go for it again. Sideboarding, shuffling. Sorry, going through this video reminded me that I needed to ask Drew for the links to his deck list so I can have them attached in the description of the video. So if you go down to the bottom in the description, you will find links to the decks we were playing here. And watching us play reminded me that I still hadn't done that. So I was sending him a text right then because I forget. That's real, folks. That's real. Looks like I'm trying to make one last decision about what I want in, what I want out, and all those shenanigans. Plus, I'm apparently like talking and I can't multitask very well. It's a life lesson, everybody. We all think we can multitask, and we can't. We really can't. Once again, as we're really getting all this stuff going on the YouTube channel here, if you have any feedback, if like you're noticing like, hey, the video quality is not super clear, or any of those types of things, please feel free to leave those as comments and we can work on continuing to make improvements to the stream. This isn't a stream, this is post-produced content. But just those kind of feedbacks of things we can start to work on are always useful and helpful. Looks like Drew's looking at his opening hand of 7. Seems like he decides to keep it. Looks like I'm going to say, hey, my hand's good. Here we go. Drew leads on a commercial district. Thinking, decides to keep it on top. Go Blooming Marsh into Delighted Halfling. Drew's going to fetch on his turn. Grabs a mountain. Plays a ritual into a Blood Moon. So my plan here is I'm thinking, okay, if I can draw a forest, I've got a Boseiju in hand. I can get rid of the Blood Moon and keep playing the game. So I don't need to just concede right away or anything because Drew doesn't have pressure on me yet. Often having something like a mana creature, like a Llanowar Elf, Birds of Paradise, Delighted Halfling, you'd think would make it so you don't care as much about the Blood Moon because it makes colored mana for you. However, remember, Delighted Halfling can only make colored mana for legendary spells, and almost all of my legendary spells that require colored mana have 2 different colors they need, or 2 different pips. Yawmoth is black, Grist is black-green. So 1 Delighted Halfling doesn't help me there. Drew's going to just go Manamorphose Grape Shot to kill that halfling. Take out that route. Dragon's Rage Channeler hits the board. I draw a second Boseiju, still no forest. Drew's going to Reckless Impulse. Surveil 1 with the DRC. It's Arid Mesa and another DRC. He's going to start to fetch, and I'm going to remind him that he can't. Or is that this? Does he try to do it again? Oh, maybe it's a later turn. So that was a mistake. He wasn't supposed to be able to fetch because there's a Blood Moon in play. He shouldn't have needed to do that or been able to do that. I missed that one. I remembered one. There must be the next turn he goes to play another land. I'm going to surveil once each from each DRC. Decides not the Manamorphose, not the Blood Moon. I'm going to evoke, cast an Endurance to get rid of his graveyard. I think this is when we say, oh, hey, gets shuffled. And I make the correction that I missed last game. It's a good thing to always be aware of, everybody, is make sure you're communicating clearly about what your cards do and what your opponents need to do, because sometimes things aren't quite intuitive, or you never remember. One thing I know I always struggle with is remembering which card effects bring in lands tapped or untapped. Like Boseiju, you can bring it in untapped. Something like Path to Exile or Ghost Quarter or some of these other effects we've seen, bring them in tapped. And I never remember which one. So it's always good, if you're unsure what exactly you're supposed to do, and ask. And also make sure you're telling your opponents clearly what they should be doing from your card effects. Drew's going to do a couple more surveils with another impulse effect. Hits a Ral and a land. Here's the one where I catch him. I've still got nothing doing. I just have a bunch of red mana. Still hoping to just draw that one of those forests. All kinds of triggers. So each Dragon's Rage Channeler is going to surveil one. The Ral is going to flip a coin, and this time he'll take a damage. We're correcting the fetch damage from before. Drew should actually be at 17 because of the other fetch. Another impulse effect is going to keep on chaining. A ritual and an impulse. He's going to surveil some more. He's going to roll a die. Ral's going to hit him again. Drew's putting those cards sideways in his graveyard to remember how many instants and sorceries have been cast for Ral's purposes this turn. I think we showed you the back side of Ral Monsoon Mage this time, but here's the front side. Because it's whenever he casts an instant or sorcery, flip a coin. If he loses the flip, it deals 1 damage. If he wins, he can exile it, and then he returns under his controls the Planeswalker side with a loyalty counter for each instant and sorcery spell he's cast this turn, so he can come in with tons and tons of loyalty. So that's why he's keeping track of those. Spells and spells and spells and spells. Instants and sorceries that are red are costing Drew 2 less because of the Ral and the Ruby Medallion in play. Looks like Drew just has a 3rd copy of Blood Moon in hand. So everything that's mattering here is face up. So Drew's deciding to not flip the Ral when he wins that coin flip, because he wants to do it when Ral can flip and have enough loyalty to go off with the ultimate, which means he needs to have cast at least 6. Ral loses another flip. All right, down to the last action spell we see here. So this card draw will need to be something for Drew. Oops, sorry. More lands. He drew more lands. But he does have a Reckless Impulse. Realizes the ritual doesn't do him much good because he needs to dig deeper. Loses the Ral flip again. A series of unfortunate events going on here. Past in Flames is only going to be a good hit now that he has hit the ritual. Just starting to get emphatic with all of his game actions. He wins the Ral flip finally, so Ral can turn over he will be able to ultimate, counting up how many instants and sorceries he's cast. Looks like that's 11 loyalty. Ral's going to exile the top 8 cards. He can cast instant and sorcery spells for free. We're just looking for a grape shot at this point, most likely. And he finally found a grape shot, and then he's going to grape shot me, and that's going to be enough for the game. We're just finding where all those pesky grape shots are. All right, we're going to do another sideboarded game here. Jeff Lump, I don't think any of us made any additional sideboarding changes once we had made our initial ones. Sometimes there are changes you want to make to your sideboard plan, whether you're on the play or on the draw against certain matchups. Really is going to depend about like at what points you need to interact, and do you need 1 mana interaction or 2 mana interaction to effectively do that, or sometimes you have threats you want on the play, but on the draw they're not nearly as good because there's more likely to be a blocker or something. Those types of things are all considerations. But if you ask me, sideboarding is one of the most difficult skills to master in Magic. It is immensely complicated, not only knowing how to build your sideboard and what to bring in, but what to bring out, that play draw difference. One thing I notice that I feel I do and I'm trying to work on, and I think many players do, is over sideboarding. Blood Moon is a classic example of a card that people always find a way to talk themselves into bringing in, even if it's actually not very good in a matchup. Because a lot of times people are like, well, if it's not a mono red deck, Blood Moon's going to do something, right? One thing I find that you need to keep in consideration for your sideboarding decisions is what turns are critical for you to be able to implement a certain strategy. And Blood Moon, for instance, being a 3 mana play, unless you have a way to accelerate it out, is sometimes too slow on the play because your opponent has gotten 3 full turns to do things, and that might be enough that they don't care. So I'm going to 6. Taking a mulligan. Took a land on the bottom. I'm going to do the same shortcut I did in game 1, announce that I'm going to use my Misty Rainforest to go fetch something. Looks like I'm going to grab an Overgrown Tomb. Use the Green Sun Zenith to grab Dryad Arbor. And we are off. So I'm at 17. Dryad Arbor, nifty little 0 mana green land creature. Turn 2, I'm going to go with a Dredger's Insight. Take the Agatha's Soul Cauldron, put it into my hand. I should gain a life there, and I do remember that. That is good. Gonna follow it up with an underground mortuary, surveil one, wall of fruits into the graveyard. Drew is gonna fetch. Doing it simultaneously to save us a little bit of time. He's gonna grab that commercial district and surveil before he goes back to his turn. Mountain. Looks like he's considering what he's got and what he wants to do for the turn. Looks like he's got a couple of ritual effects, a grape shot, maybe one of those card draws, a ral. Looks like it's going to be Pyretic Ritual, make 3 red mana. Use 2 of that to cast Ral Monsoon Mage. Now his instants and sorceries cost 1 less. It's gonna grape shot just to deal some damage to me and kill the Dryad Arbor. Slow down my mana acceleration. Ral's gonna deal 1 to him as well. And then he passes back to my turn. Verdant Catacombs into Prosperous Innkeeper. This is one of those cards that enables some of those combos in Yawmoth. 2 mana, 1/1. When it enters, create a treasure token. And whenever another creature enters under your control, you gain a life. Gonna follow it up with that Agatha's Soul Cauldron we already knew about. And back over to Drew. Ral's gonna attack for 1. Unknown mode of Ral attacking. Looks like Drew's gonna pass. Doesn't seem to have much he wants to do on this turn. I'm gonna activate Agatha's Soul Cauldron. Looks like I'm choosing to target one of my creatures. It's gonna be Wall of Roots. Drew asked me why I didn't block and use the Soul Cauldron to make my Prosperous Innkeeper survive combat. I was talking about how I might have wanted to be able to interact with his graveyard on his turn, or I didn't want to walk into a bait attack where then he gets to kill my Prosperous Innkeeper because with a Walking Ballista in my graveyard that the Dredger's Insight flipped over, if I draw a Young Wolf, I can gain infinite life through one of the combos because I have the Wall of Roots. Essentially the way that one works is you put the +1/+1 counter on the Young Wolf. You use the Wall of Roots ability to add a green mana by placing a -0, -1 counter on the Young Wolf. Then you can use the Walking Ballista's ability to infinite damage on infinite life, to deal a damage to your opponent. When the counter is removed from the Ballista ability, the Young Wolf will become a 1/0 creature, and then it'll die, which will trigger Undying. It'll come back with Undying, and you can do it over and over and over again. So I'd just be able to Walking Ballista ping Drew's life total down to 0. And so I was explaining how I wanted to keep all of that stuff available and open, and having Prosperous Innkeeper and Dredger's Insight in play means that I am able to have lots of combo possibilities open to me. I believe I missed gaining a life when the Haywire Might entered play. Prosperous Innkeeper should have seen another creature enter and gained me 1 life. I don't believe I did that. But we're over to Drew's turn. He's going to play another mountain. Looks like he's got is that a Manamorphose in hand that I can see? Yeah, it looks like a Manamorphose. Can't tell what the other cards are, though. Going for a 3-mana play, Past in Flames. Reduced by 1. So we're deciding on the Ral trigger. He's deciding if he wants to flip the Ral or not. So in response to the Ral flip, I'm going to cast Endurance. So I'm going to use the Walvard's ability to put the negative counter on my Prosperous Innkeeper and the 2 open lands to cast the Endurance to get rid of Drew's graveyard. We're just talking about when these things resolve. Looks like Drew's thinking if he wants to take any actions in response to the Endurance ability, because he's going to lose that graveyard that he's hoping to have for the Past in Flames. Drew's graveyard is shuffled onto the bottom of the library. The Ral flips. So the Past in Flames resolves. There's just nothing to give flashback to. Looks like maybe there's a second Grape Shot, a Manamorphose, and one of the Impulse effects is what it looks like is in Drew's hands. Drew's hand. Looks like he's going to uptick, reducing the cost of his instants and sorceries. 2 damage. He just wants to kill my Haywire Might and my Prosperous Innkeeper. Fetch on Drew's end step. Believe I should be also activating Agatha's Soul Cauldron, and I think I forget to. Drew scrolling through cards as we're talking about other options for this, that, and the other thing as well. Maybe that's also spoilers for the new set. Not sure. I'm taking out my Dryad Arbor. Oh yeah, I'm doing this so I have a 4 power endurance so I can kill Drew's Ral on my turn with an attack. Still at that point where just drawing a Young Wolf, a Green Sun Zenith, Court of Calling are all game enders. And I just can't seem to find one. And Drew's talking about the, you can see it on his phone there, the Storm Dragon that's coming out in Tarkir Dragon Storm. Believe it or not, the guy playing the Storm deck has high hopes for the dragon that has Storm on it. Guess you don't need to see Prosperous Innkeeper anymore. Sorry. Like I said, multitasking, we're not good at it. All right, looks like Drew's finally going to fire off that Manamorphose, who we've seen in his hand for a couple of turns. I was asking about the cost of Past in Flames in the graveyard. The flashback is 1 more than the regular casting cost, so it's 4 mana. On the front side, the flashback is 5. So, doesn't find something he wants to do with the Manamorphose, just passes turn. That's where I forgot to activate the Agatha Soul Cauldron, and I should have. Drew mentioned it, and I said, well, I've missed it, so we're just going to play it like that. I draw another land. And sadly, out of Surveil lands. He's going to play Blood Moon. I'm going to fetch in response, and I believe go grab a Swamp, so I at least still have all of my colors of mana. I've also been forgetting to update Drew's life total. I think I missed one from a fetch on a previous turn. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I apologize. I was just really, really bad at keeping up the life totals as we were doing this, and apparently I got worse. But Drew is not at 15. I believe he's somewhere in the single digits. Oh, there we go. I finally catch up. He's down to 6. Just take an attack for 5 from the Endurance. The Endurance is now threatening lethal on the next turn with the Agatha Soul Cauldron activation. I'm going to take out the Past in Flames with the Agatha Soul Cauldron in response to the Ral. Drew's going to play another Past in Flames there. He's going to take a hit for 1. From that, he's going to start going off. Seeing if he can go off here. Start with that Manamorphose. Make 2 mana, draw a card. I think what he's looking for is the ability to try to kill this Endurance with the Grape Shot plus the Ral flip. Finds an Impulse effect. Working together as a team to keep track of mana and Storm and all that sort of stuff. This is where we're talking about Drew's realizing, like, oh no, what I'm hoping to do is Grape Shot, deal 4 damage to the Endurance that has 6 toughness, and then win the flip on Ral, use its 2 damage ability to finish off the Endurance, and then keep playing the game, as I mentioned, that, like, I've got Walking Ballista in the yard, so I've got lethal even without an attack. So 4 damage, And Drew's got to win this flip for things to happen. He does not. And then I just have to put Walking Ballista under the endurance and use that ability. So that is going to be game 2 Yawmoth. It was a very uneventful game, honestly. Not much going on. All right, folks. So as we saw, just a little bit of gameplay between Yawmoth and Storm. Some exciting, cool games where both decks are comboing off. Other games like that last one where not a whole lot is going on. Okay. Hopefully you enjoyed watching. If you did, do all those YouTube things, like, comment, subscribe. If you just want to know when we come out with more content, do that subscription thing. Then you'll at least see when we put out new videos. We'll have some more stuff coming out here soon. So have a good one, and we'll see you next time.